just want to follow up a bit with some more musings, thoughts on the passing of Prince Philip. Um, 99 years is a long, long life, and in my opinion, he didn't waste those years. This was a man who really did lead a full life in many ways. Um, there's going to be a lot of commentary about his biography and so on, as there always is with senior member of the royal family passing away. In fact, I have to go back to 2002 with the deaths of Princess Margaret and the Queen Mother. I think to find a senior member of the royal family who's died. So it's not a very common occurrence. It's something that is relatively rare. And with that in mind, it's a big news story. But Philip was the longest serving consort in British history. Not just British history, English and British history. If you go right back to over 1,000 years of the English and British monarchy, um, there's no one comes close. Um, I see some analogies between Philip and Prince Albert, Victoria's spouse, of course, in the sense they were both modern men. In a sense, they both were full of ideas and innovative. Um, Philip was always interested in science and technology, and Prince Albert was very much a man of the Industrial Revolution. Of course, he was a major driving force in the Great Exhibition of 1851, also known as the Crystal Palace exhibition, excuse me, um, which was really the world's first World Expo. Um, of course, the difference is Prince Albert was only 42 when he passed away, which made Queen Victoria a widow for some 39 years. On the other hand, our current Queen is now dealing with widowhood after an entire reign with this man beside her and 73 years of marriage, which is remarkable for anyone, but particularly for public figures. Um, so I think it must be. I think the Queen is stoic. I'm sure she would have known that he was getting on. His health wasn't good. Apparently, she was content with palliative care rather than going back into hospital. Probably knew this was coming, but it must still be a strange feeling. Um, the Duchess of Wessex, as they were driving to see the monarch, said that she is coping very well. So I can believe that. But I still think it must be strange for her, to be alone really after 73 years. It must be hard. But, I want to just say a few personal things about what I take from Prince Philip the Man. Um, there's been quite a lot said about his outspoken nature. And it is true that there were times that he maybe um, did go too far, or rather was a little bit too blunt. And you could argue that, people couldn't exactly defend themselves because this is a consort to the British monarch. So it was a little bit inappropriate the way he done that. There is another school of thought. The reason Philip done it was actually to put people at ease by taking the stiffiness out of the occasion by cracking jokes. It's just that not everyone shared a sense of humour. So a few examples are when he asked Australian Aboriginal people if they still threw spears at each other. When he made an off-colour joke about Chinese students being slanty-eyed. What's interesting about that is apparently in China it was a non-issue. I think today it would be a different matter because of the way nationalism is today and the way the internet is and so on. But back then in the 80s, apparently it was simply in response to Chinese characteristics of their children turning round-eyed if they studied in the West for too long. And Philip was just following on top of that. There was one occasion I thought he was a little bit too blunt, which was he was visiting a school. One child apparently had bad handwriting, and Philip was quite harsh in his criticism, I thought. Um, but there's another side to it, and it's this: we live in an era of very, very, where word policing is going on all the time. People are always getting into hot water over something that's said. We know that this is a very sensitive age in that sense. Um, I do think there's something to be said for a man who spoke his mind. I think that's quite admirable in an era when you could get into such hot water. Now, you might argue that his position sort of protected him in a way that other public figures, say a politician or a singer or an artist, would maybe not be insulated in the same way. Nevertheless, I think there's something to be said for that. And me personally, I try to be a man who speaks my mind. Probably not as blunt as the Duke was, but I do think there's something to be said for that. I think he was true to himself. And a situation like this will bring out, yes, it will bring out sycophantic royalists, but will also bring out vitriolic Republicans. There'll be people. I've seen some truly tasteless comments like another parasite is gone. That kind of angers me, and this is why. It's just not accurate. This was a man who dedicated his life to public service, and people when they vilify members of the royal family like this, and talking about hardcore Republicans, when they talk about them being parasites, they just casually ignore the extensive charity work and patronage that members of the royal family are involved in. Now, excuse me, I've just had a large dinner. Um, if you take the Duke of Edinburgh, for example, the Duke of Edinburgh scheme, it's it's not just a bit of tokenism. This was something that really did change lives. In my last video, I said probably thousands of lives. I was wrong. It was millions, millions of young people around the world. I think they estimated 4 million young people around the world had their lives changed for this. And it's not just handed out. They have to really work at it. Talk about equal opportunity, talk about diversity. This was something that really was designed to help young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, including disabled young people. The principle being that even if they have physical disabilities, there would be other things that they could do. I had never done it myself, but I've always heard good things about the Duke of Edinburgh Awards. Um, and the testimonies that are coming in, you can dislike the monarchy, you can dislike the royal family, you can even dislike Philip as a person, but there's no question that that scheme changed lives. There was one young man who had been in prison and he got involved in the scheme, and now he's a professional chef. That was what he wanted to pursue. He served his time, but that is what came out of it. So, this was something that really did change lives. Um, And I just wish that when people, it's not just Prince Philip, it's other members of the royal family, when they vilify them and call them lazy and call them parasites, they're ignoring this sort of thing. And in the case of Prince Charles, it's the Prince's Trust. I really get tired of that vilification that you get from some far left and Republican quarters. Um, I respect moderate views. I respect views that we need to abolish the monarchy. I don't agree with it, but I respect it and I understand where it's coming from. Because in the end of the day, it is a hereditary system of privilege. But we privilege again is subjective in this sense. And actually, Douglas Murray made this point recently when he was talking about the idea of privilege. Are members of the royal family privileged? I would say yes and no. Yes, insofar as they have very comfortable lives in the sense of material comfort. They're very wealthy. They never have to worry about, not getting a doctor on time or being victims of crime because they always have their security personnel around them and that sort of thing. So it's privilege in that sense. On the other hand, they are under constant scrutiny and they do have to conform to very strict protocol, which the institution itself sets. Um, So it is and it isn't privileged. It's privileged in terms of material wealth, but is that the only barometer of privilege? I think in some ways it's quite shackling. And I do think that one thing that should come out of recent news is the institution should maybe be a little bit less shackling on its own members. Um, some royal protocols are stuffy and outdated. Um, And the irony is that, Philip was a great patriarch of the family. He was an outsider. He came to Britain in an orange crate. It's, calling it a Cinderella story would be going too far, but it is quite a remarkable life story. This was a man who served honorably in the Second World War. I believe he was one of the youngest lieutenants in the Royal Navy. In the previous video, I mentioned Cape Manapan. Should have been Cape Matapan. Um, it was a major British victory. I think we only had three casualties to over 1,000 Italian casualties, but major battle in the war with Italy. Um, but what I take from the Duke of Edinburgh is this was a man who knew full well his constitutional position was somewhat restrained. He wasn't the monarch; he was the consort. And like I said before, for a man in the 1940s, 1950s to kind of be second fiddle to his wife, it might not seem like much now, but at that time, that was it was definitely outside his comfort zone, particularly for quite an alpha male like Prince Philip was. Yet he was, he stood by her side all that time. And whilst I think the Queen is, or our Queen is, a very strong constitutional monarch, I do think that Philip has been a major stabilizing force for her. Um, his funeral is going to be next Saturday. It's going to be a low key affair, which is by his own wishes, interestingly enough. The Prime Minister has given up his position so more members of the royal family can attend. It will be on television. People are ignoring the rules about not leaving flowers. I mean, honestly, particularly with his interests in conservation, I'm not sure the Duke would want all those flowers. Because you often wonder where do they go to? Are they ground up and used for compost or something? That would at least be sustainable. Otherwise, it's just a waste. Um, when Diana died, of course, there was mountains of flowers. Um, but I have to say, both Matt Smith and Tobias Menzies, who have both spoken about the Duke's death, and of course, they're the actors who played him in The Crown. They they really portrayed that side of Philip well, even though he didn't watch it. I think they got his mannerisms right and his outspoken nature. And from interviews I've seen with the Duke, and from his public profile, this was a man who basically said what was on his mind. And like I say, it doesn't mean that he was always right. It doesn't mean that he couldn't be a little bit rude at times. But I do think in an era when we are so keen on self censorship and so worried about insulting people and so worried about what other people think, there is something to be said for that. I really do believe that. There may be more to say about this. Um, yeah, just a bit of trivia. He was the oldest, or rather, longest lived ever male member of the British royal family. Not, however, the oldest. In fact, there was two people in the British royal family that lived longer than Prince Philip. Princess Alice, Duchess of Gloucester. She was the daughter-in-law of King George V from her marriage to Prince Henry, Duke of Gloucester, and she died in 2004 at the age of 102 and 309 days. Uh, she was a maternal aunt to the Queen. Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, of course, died in 2002 at the age of 101 and 238 days. Prince Philip, 99 and 303 days, so within months of his centenary. Um, so, there is a history of longevity in the British royal family. Of course, that's contrasted with the early death of King George VI. But I must admit, in recent months, I've looked at Prince Philip in a more favourable light. I must admit, my previous perception was kind of a bit like he's a negative stereotype of a stuffy British aristocrat, and kind of, I guess, the unfortunate stereotype of the British royal family. But frankly, in more recent months, I've grown more respect for him. And yeah, I think there is some things to take away from the fact that this was a man who who said what was on his mind. He was plain talking. At times that could be a little blunt, but it's better than being a liar or being manipulative. So rest in peace, Prince Philip. And this is good cover of the times, I think. I thought her, of course, with the Queen, as she's a widow now, must be a strange feeling for her. And I'll leave it there.